This one night, me and Mama was out shopping, and we walked right by Benson's Furniture and Appliance store. And guess what?
You ain't nothing but
This scene from Forrest Gump perfectly encapsulates the juxtaposition of the early 1950s to the modern time period. Censorship throughout time has always come across as an unwelcome appeal to authority, especially in the United States. Robert Zemeckis, the director of Forrest Gump, used these recognizable historic events to help the audience relate to what was happening to the film, while also presenting them with the comedic presence of Forrest himself. Since Gump was so oblivious towards the impact he made on modern culture, it helps to document these moments by exposing the uninformed youth who are watching today to these more obscure parts of our history. There are several other instances of this, and seeing Forrest Gump's mom shield him from viewing Elvis's dancing is one of the best examples to show the effects of film censorship from the past. In comparison to the waves of hysteria towards heavy metal bands or rap music, it's hard to imagine that Elvis Presley's dancing, which is relatively tame in today's climate, would be the subject of censorship. The controversy surrounding Elvis is something that is often questioned by the generations that grow up today. With sensationalized violence and adult-type programming being available all at a click of a button, a man singing cover songs about girls and moving his hips is something that may perplex the modern person. On the Ed Sullivan Show, Sullivan famously did not want to have Elvis on since he was such a controversial figure at the time. Back then, Elvis was seen as the real-world representation of teenage angst, which was accentuated by his overly sexualized dancing style. At the time, this type of dancing was unthinkable. Parents did not want their children to be exposed to this, as they feared it would tarnish their growing, sensible minds. They felt the young children being exposed to this might cause teenage rebellion to ensue through the youth. A popular instance of censorship towards Elvis was his eventual appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show. During this recording, they made a decision to only film him on the waist up, to keep with the more family-friendly theming of the show. This was not the first case of censorship because of a person's dancing, and in this episode of Film History Digest, we will go over the effects of censorship in film over the years, and how it eventually led to what we know as the MPAA. Let us begin. To fully understand the history of censorship, we have to go back to before the invention of the moving image, photography, and even the effects of the first working light bulb. One of the first true cases of censorship goes back to around the biblical period, where religious texts were widely disputed. This is one of the first widely published versions of censorship, and arguably the most popular. Religious censorship was also one of the main reasons why European settlers made their daunting voyage overseas to the Americas. Censorship is arguably one of the most important aspects to our past as humans, being the way that we have worked around censorship has often led to some of the most creative works of all time. The idea of free speech was something so important to the settlers that we wrote it into the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, which this country is founded upon. And then we have film. In the past, people were hesitant on film and its lasting effects, thinking of it as just another fad. Film, just as any other type of entertainment, had to prove its worth and value to society as a whole. This type of behavior has been shown throughout history, with the video game crash of 1983 being a prime example of a mass sway in consumer opinion. We know how successful both video games and film have been. At this time, there was no knowing if film was going to last or not. It's the process of building it up which actually started the initial development of the Motion Picture Association of America, or MPAA. Thomas Edison, leader in the development of filmography research, tried to find new ways to innovate in this realm. As many of you might already know, his contributions to film are not really what Edison is best known for, but his employee, William K.L. Dixon, was. He helped to direct a number of projects for Edison, leading toward a number of firsts in the movie world. The 1984 short film, Edison Kinetoscopic Record of a Sneeze, is notable for being the first movie to ever be protected by a copyright. Some of his most notable works include the Monkey Shines movies, which were some of the earliest movies we have today. With the innovations Dixon made, he could be considered the first real film director. Although Edison directed a few of his own movies, Dixon was known more for being a director during this time period. With the first case of film censorship, remember how controversial Elvis's hip gyrations were? Well, more than 50 years earlier, Dixon was having to deal with a similar controversy with his short film, Carmencita, which was the first case of censorship in film. Carmencita became heavily censored in some cases by showing less of the actress, as not to offend people with her dancing and exposure of her ankles. This was the first real instance of film censorship. Moving forward, the film industry more and more started to develop into what we know today. In 1922, the first rendition of the MPAA, known as the MPPDA, or the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, set up versions of this censorship in order to ensure investments from the Wall Street investors and better public relations with the government. This fell in line after a landmark decision from the U.S. Supreme Court stating in 1915 that the exhibition of moving pictures is a business, pure and simple, originated and conducted for profit, like other spectacles, and not to be regarded as part of the press of the country or as organs of public opinion within the meaning of freedom of speech and publication. With the MPPDA, they sought to govern the moral tone of film, as to show the more positive influence of film in the United States. This helped to mitigate the exposure of sexual and racist themes portrayed on screen, and led the government to take more control of the output of film. The main issue with the MPPDA's type of censorship was how loose the guidelines were, and the fact that studios and filmmakers rarely followed them to begin with. There were several types of guidelines and attempts to censor film over the years from the MPPDA and other censorship groups. None of these guidelines really took off in popularity, with studios and filmmakers being more loose with the types of movies they produced. It was not until 1930 when the first real rendition of the production code, often referred to as the Hays Code, started to get actual traction. This code, nicknamed after the MPPDA's president at the time, Will H. Hays, was the first case in which movie studios and filmmakers began to openly support the Hays Code and tailor their movie output to heavily suit these guidelines. The problem with the code was how restrictive it was and how it created an output where every film had to follow the same narrative beats, opposed to full creativity. The rules that accompanied this text included some of the following: no expression of profanity in any form, the aforementioned accentuated dance moves, the exploration of anything related to sexual activity, any type of violent activity, and religious mockery. While this may have been harsh for the time, the code simultaneously approved of the depictions of real-life hangings, the branding of real people and animals, cruelty towards animals and children, along a strange list of exceptions only if done tastefully. The incorporation of sound into what was once thought of as a soundless medium is what is commonly cited as the reasoning for the censorship, as is mentioned in the Hays Code itself. These rules help to ensure against corruption of the youth, and sustain people from being able to recreate anything that may incite violence or any other act. The code began to see a change when the United States Supreme Court reversed their previous decision on how free speech applies to filmmaking. The Supreme Court put out this statement: "Expression by means of motion pictures is included within the free speech and free press guarantee of the First and 14th Amendments." That, combined with the movies Man with a Golden Arm, Blow Up, Baby Doll, and the invention of broadcast television, it was clear that it was time for some changes to the now renamed MPAA, inciting what is often referred to as the counterculture era. Jack Valenti, former aide to President Lyndon B. Johnson, became the head of the MPAA and began to see changes that needed to take place.
Hello, I'm Jack Valenti, and these are my cheeks.
In 1968, he discontinued the Hays Code and replaced it with a voluntary film rating system. The film Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, an adaptation of a stage play previously thought impossible to show on the big screen due to including sexual and violent moments, showed how successful a movie could be with these contents. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf was nominated for 13 Oscars, being one of the only 2 movies in history to ever be nominated in every eligible category at the Academy Awards. Around the same time, Jack Valenti saw the limitations of the production code and decided to revamp it into something similar to what we knew today. The ratings were as follows: G, M, R, and X. The biggest difference between this system and the one we know today is the omission of the PG-13 rating, which was actually added due to a recommendation from film director Steven Spielberg after some parental backlash towards his movies. PG-13 has grown to be the best bet for filmmakers today, as it brings back the most investment at the box office. While this may be the case, many have criticized the rating for limiting creativity and mitigating the violence and content of more mature movies just to make a bigger impact at the theaters. The M rating has also had a lot of revisions over time as well, being rebranded to GP and then PG later on. The last biggest change to the MPAA rating system was the change of X to NC-17, as to differentiate the ratings from the porn industry, which it had become widely associated with. Through all of these ratings, it becomes difficult to graph which were the first movies to take on these ratings. There is actually very little documentation on film ratings as they applied to movies, and which ones received which ratings at which times. The first MPPDA approved movie was The World Moves On in 1934, which was before the changes to the system that Valenti made. The first movie under these new ratings was with Dracula Has Risen from the Grave. What is also interesting about this movie is that it was not just the first movie to be rated under this new system, but the first movie to be rated G. With the graphic detail incited from a Dracula movie, it is still a little strange to see something like this movie in a category with some of the movies we would consider G today. It is a lot harder to follow the history of the PG rating, with the general consensus that Live a Little, Love a Little was the first movie to be given an M rating. With the movie starring Elvis Presley, it shows the fight he still had with censorship, even in film, especially being compared to the likes of Dracula. The first movie with the GP rating to be released was Ramparts of Clay in France. The first movie to have the PG rating that we know today is Cabaret in 1972. When PG-13 started, the first movie to get the rating was The Flamingo Kid, but it was not released till December, giving Red Dawn the classification of the first released PG-13 movie. The first R-rated movie was The Split. This film did not star James McAvoy, and instead followed a series of thieves having a falling out over $500,000 going missing. The first X movie was called Greetings, and is actually quite notable for being one of the first movies to launch the career of Robert De Niro. When NC-17 became instated, the movie Henry and June was the first film to have that rating. Ever since the beginnings of ratings, however, the dreaded X or NC-17 was always a point of contention in the film industry, as filmmakers felt it to be a death sentence to their movie. Over the years, there have been a lot of conversations about what constitutes being put into these certain categories. Trying to find out how to safely traverse the MPAA to get your desired rating has been shown to be difficult and created a lot of rumors and speculation over time. Something that is usually pointed to is the F-bomb. As many people might already know, if your movie is PG-13, you can only say the F word one time without giving an R rating, which was even backed up by Joan Graves, who oversees the ratings board at the MPAA.
Nice fucking model!
That was a scene from the 1988 Tim Burton film, Beetlejuice. The catch? It came out almost 5 years after the initial implementation of the PG-13 rating, and still got a PG rating. In 2011, the popular David Fincher film, The Social Network, said the F word twice and still maintained a PG-13 rating.
Sorry, my Prada's at the cleaners! Along with my hoodie and my fuck you flip-flops, you pretentious douchebag!
Sean Parker says fuck you.
And the movie The American President even said it 3 times.
Why are you always one step behind me?
Because if I wasn't, you'd be the most popular history professor at the University of Wisconsin.
Fuck you! And I'm gonna make a list of everybody who tried to fuck us this week!
Lewis!
Yeah, well, just vote your conscience, you chicken shit lame ass!
Like a mandatory 3-day waiting period before a 5-year-old can buy an Uzi. Oh, fuck the sweater. She'll have to learn to live with disappointment.
This type of hypocrisy has led to a lot of frustration with filmmakers and studios. Since there are no set-in-line ways to follow these ratings, the MPAA has gotten a negative rep for censorship over the years, and none of which is more apparent than in the movie This Film Is Not Yet Rated. In 2006, the movie This Film Is Not Yet Rated tried to expose the secrets of the MPAA, and the unfairness that went along with it. The movie has amassed a mostly positive reputation over the years, although there are several questionable aspects to it. For example, in the movie, the director hires private investigators in an attempt to dox the people involved with the MPAA, which he puts great attention on in his film. He did this to shed light of the secrecy that the organization puts up without properly viewing the consequences of his actions. Through time, the MPAA has hired parents to give notes on the movies being shown, and the secrecy involved is to keep away public intervention from the lives of these normally mundane individuals. Not only does he show the houses of some of these people, he is seen digging through their trash and watching them eat. It's a bit, weird. He does all of this in order to show the public who are rating their films, as if that even matters to the common moviegoer. The main criticism they have with the secrecy of the MPAA is how difficult it is to get clear thoughts from them. Later on in this movie, they end up interviewing Matt Stone from South Park fame to talk about the difficulties they have had over the years, citing their work in Orgasmo versus a South Park movie as a clear indication of studio favoritism.
We got off this phone call with the MPAA, and the guy would basically say, it's for the overall sexual content. I said, was there anything we can cut out to get an R? You're welcome to recut it and send it back to us, and we'll certainly look at it again. And their whole position was, when we did this film, was we don't give specific notes, because then we'd be a censorship organization. We just give you the rating. And cut to 5 years later, we're doing the South Park movie, and now we're working for Paramount, it's a big studio. And we turned in the first cut of the movie, and we get a phone call, and you got an NC-17. Well, you need to cut out this, change this to this, and it was extremely specific. This word, this line, this joke. So our treatment was was a completely different experience.
They also interviewed Kimberly Peace about Boys Don't Cry, and how she felt she was unable to properly portray this story after having to jump through all of these hoops to authentically portray an LGBTQ transgender standpoint. The main problem with this argument is the fact that these movies were already made. What does that entail? Well, let us go back a little to better understand what it means to be donned with an NC-17 rating. It is better to view these ratings as suggestions, as it is still possible to theatrically release a movie without an NC-17 rating. Just because a movie is NC-17 doesn't mean it's not going to get views, and chances are if a movie is to a point where they can submit it to the MPAA, then the studio and investors are going to find a way to get money back no matter what comes back from them. Popular online video creator James Rolfe ended up releasing Angry Video Game Nerd the movie across the country and even internationally. He did this without having any type of rating from the MPAA and was able to play it to sold-out theaters. The Dreamers was released theatrically as well, while still retaining the NC-17 rating. There is also more of a market for NC-17 home releases, with Showgirls becoming one of MGM's best-selling movies of all time. Even without studio intervention, it could still be argued that it's unfair for independent filmmakers without the backing of a large studio. With that in mind, can you remember the last time you saw an independent film in theaters? These days, theaters are reserved for the bigger Disney-type blockbusters, and have seen little success with anything other than the occasional religious outing. Less and less people want to see movies like Boys Don't Cry in theaters, because the market has heavily shifted towards streaming sites and other avenues. Even with the issues Boys Don't Cry had with the MPAA, it was still released with large success and made back $20 million at the box office. So while it may be sad to see the end of theatrical experiences, it comes at the advantage of home entertainment at a moment's notice. With technology's continued advancements, we are beginning to see a large increase in creative expression, as we're being less limited by the industry and more by the advancements of our own mind. And the way things are headed, systems like this are going to eventually become more and more obsolete over time. With that being said, let us push that PG-13 rating.
Knock knock. Who's there? Go fuck yourselves.
Hello everyone, my name is Turkey Tom. Thank you so much for watching Film History Digest. If you would like to support the channel, instead of subscribing, pressing that bell, or liking the video, it would help us out a lot more if you would share this video on Twitter, Facebook, and Discord. It helps get the channel seen by more people and is appreciated greatly. If you liked this video, or hated it, please let us know in the comments below. All feedback is appreciated more than you may know. Subscribe if you would like to see more videos like this in the future. We upload every month, and if you are interested in some of the other content, check out some of the videos we have on the screen. And if you like my voice, go check out my channel. Alright, that's all for today. Turkey Tom, out.